we start with some of the initial sort of logistical things, okay? So welcome to everybody who's here. We have 23 people in the room, so that's wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and start some of the logistical stuff and hope that we can get everybody in. Let me type one last message to my colleagues.
Good morning, Jude. I'm here with you.
Oh, good. Thanks, Yadid. I'm texting to Carrie. Just log in with your regular email. So.
Okay, I'll help. I'll support her.
We're going. So let's start with some of the logistical stuff. We'll get that going first, okay? So happy Earth Day, everybody. It's Earth Day today. Woo! Excited about that. And, you know, we have a beautiful day, apparently a little bit of rain coming later. So thank you for joining us, everyone, as we're building this community of caring. We have a unique opportunity in this moment in time, and we want to take advantage of it. Let's not waste it, and let's work toward making a difference, right? So let's talk about some useful tips going forward in how we can work together here. So I'm going to ask you to use the chat box to send questions or if you need any assistance. So Yodit is with me and she'll help with that. Hopefully Carrie's coming in as well. If you're using a desktop or Zoom app, either way, if there's a way that you can type your name in, it makes it a little bit friendlier when we try and reach out to each other, or we see that maybe you're unmuting yourself and you want to say something, or you're waving your hands at one of us. We want to be responsive to that. You're muted automatically, so double check that you are, please. If you have a little red microphone in the lower left of your screen, that's the way it should be. We are recording this, so I'm going to ask that you turn on your video if possible, not only so that we can see you and it's more friendly, but then also the recording will have your image on the screen. For those of you on the phone, I'm sorry, but we're glad you're here too. And make sure you're on speaker view if you can, because then you'll be able to see who's speaking. And when we move to our speakers, that'll be a big deal. Our agenda for today is not only this welcoming sort of thing, but I want to introduce all of us to you. So I'm Judy Neimer-Munn from NEW. Yodit Mesfin-Johnson is on the screen as well. And hopefully Carrie's going to be able to make it in with us. We'll be moving through 2 speakers this morning, and there will be a couple of opportunities for you to interact with us. So I hope that you will do that. Our conversation for today is about self-care, not only for ourselves, but also to lift up avenues of how we can be healthy so that we can be healthy to support our staff. So we will have a number of opportunities for you to engage with us and give us some comments. We will be copying as much of the chat as we can, because I'm creating a resource list of tools that we'll be sending out to you. So items that you type into the chat box that are resources you found, whether it's an online yoga platform or a meditation, philosophy about how to manage staff virtually, whatever that looks like, we'd like to be able to share it with the broader group. A little bit about NEW. We are grateful for the opportunity to share with you that we provide a lot of services to the nonprofit community, and we are grateful to partner and work alongside leaders in the Southeast Michigan region to offer IT services, financial support, board development, organizational development work. I neglected on the previous slide to mention that we are in partnership also with COACT, and I believe our partners from COACT, Alondra Bulger and Kyla Carlson, were going to be on the webinar with us this morning. I'm not looking at the participant list, but I hope they're here and I'm welcoming them. We're really glad that they've been sharing with us. And by the way, that resource list that's coming to you is also a partnership with them. They've given us a whole bunch of really great resources that they found. One of the things that we do at NEW and one of the things that we do to facilitate groups is having some norms, and we've adapted them a little bit for the virtual environment because there's always nuances to consider. So a couple of things. Please, so you've offered us some grace this morning by helping us kind of adapt to the fact that whatever happened with the link and some people are trying to get in. So thank you for that grace, but we're asking that we offer it to each other as well. Patience and understanding as we all get used to this virtual environment and working into the new way of work. We started pretty close to on time, so I'm grateful for that. We will end on time. Please practice self-care. If you need to take a minute, take a break, or your child or pet comes into the room, please don't worry about that. We are very understanding of the fact that we're all working from our home environments, and we're grateful that you're doing that to keep everyone safe. Thank you for engaging actively and not being on your cell phones or doing something else in the meantime. We really want to be present here and now and practice deep listening. So this is, again, to my earlier point that this is a unique moment in time that we want to take advantage of, and the profound information behind that, the learning that we obtain is really important. So learning from each other as well as being attentive to ourselves. We're going to use the chat feature by and large, so that'll encourage some engagement, hopefully, with some of you. We are going to have speakers speaking actively, so we're going to ask you to not attempt to unmute yourself. Background sounds and all of that will kind of be a disturbance. And if there is some issue that somebody needs to bring up, please do it in the chat box so that we can assist you that way. And I appreciate you doing that. And embracing discomfort. We're going to ask for your efforts toward leaning into trying to understand what the discomfort is about, getting at depth with yourself and your environment. And our speakers today have some information about that that we think will help you. So a little bit about why we're here and why we started this series, this being the first of every other week sessions that we will have with topics. We're working to support the nonprofit community and increase our connectedness with each other in spite of the distance and working from home. We want to provide you with the wisdom of some wonderful experts in the community that we brought into this chat activity in the coming weeks, and the resources and information to support you and your teams going forward in this environment. We want to help to foster some camaraderie between and among all of us. So please we encourage you to use the chat box to share emails back and forth with each other. If somebody's typed in a resource that you like the looks of, reach out to them. You can do that privately in the chat box by just pulling down the little participants list at the bottom, and you can actually even chat with them separately. But if it's something that you're reaching out to the group for, you can do that as well. We'll encourage you to do that, especially during this time, because all of us lifting each other up helps the whole community as we serve in the nonprofit sector. We want to encourage actionable things. So part of the reason that we're creating the resource list is so that not only you have actionable things to go to, act on, read, utilize, we are happy to share that with you and hope that you'll share it with your teams. So we want it to be very practical. I hope that works for you. So with that, Yodit, if you want to take on the next part.
Absolutely. Thanks, Judy. I'll move quickly so we can get started. The idea behind having Lisa and Michelle, who I have the pleasure of introducing you to here, was really about what it means to be a healthy leader in the midst of a pandemic and how it is that we can support our teams through this incredibly traumatizing and difficult time. So I'm excited to introduce you to friend and colleague Lisa Baker, who's a full-time health coach, nonprofit consultant, author, blogger, just overall awesome person. She's also a self-described sanity whisperer, which I love, and here to bring us quite a bit from her repertoire. And we're also joined by Dr. Michelle Rodriguez, who's a psychologist with a group practice here in Washtenaw County called Collaborative Changemakers. Again, talented, multiple years of experience providing counseling in university and community centers. So it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce you to Lisa and Michelle. Jude, can you advance the slides?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Here I am.
There we go. Thanks, Lisa. There you are.
So I thought it would be really good to start this morning with a little centering and just presenting a couple exercises that are so simple that you can do them yourself anytime you find the need to ground yourself, and also share them with other people. They are that simple. And so I really want to provide exercises that are really easy to take away from here. So in the interest of really landing here and now, first of all, thank you all for getting up early, if this is early for you. And I'd like to start with the centering exercises, and you can do this either standing or sitting. And the very first thing I want you to do is to just really feel into the ground, whether you're standing or sitting. So either your feet or your sit bones. And then as you breathe in, lean forward. So everybody lean towards the camera if you're on camera. So breathe in and lean forward. And as you breathe out, come back to center. Now do the same thing going backwards. Inhale and lean back. And exhale, come back to center. Inhale and lean right. Exhale and come back to center. Inhale and lean left. And exhale and come back to center. And then really just, drop your shoulders, land where you are, whether you're seated or standing. And see if that feels a little different. See if that feels a little more centered, a little more present. The next thing I want to introduce is two very simple breathing exercises. And the first one is really just learning how to breathe deeply, because a lot of us breathe up in the upper part of our chest. We use about 1/3 of our lung capacity on a regular basis. And the faster you breathe and the more shallowly you breathe, the more stressed you will get. And I know Michelle is going to talk about the stress response, and that will come into play there. But what I want you to think about is, I call this exercise the pitcher, and it's a form of yoga breathing. Think about a pitcher of water. As you fill it from the tap, you're going to fill the bottom first, and then it's going to gradually fill to the top. So instead of breathing in from your chest, I want you to breathe in from the bottom of your diaphragm. So if it helps, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And as you breathe in, I want the hand on your belly to rise first, okay? So breathe in, and then gradually you'll find that your chest rises. And when you exhale, do the reverse. So think about pouring that pitcher out, and you're gonna exhale from the top. So the top hand will move, and then exhale from the bottom, from your belly. And just think about doing that whenever you need to calm down. It's one of the simplest ways that we can start to lessen our stress response. So as you breathe in, remember the belly rises first and then the chest. And then when you empty, the chest falls and then the belly. If you want to take this one step further, the next thing is called 2x breath. And what that means is you're going to exhale for twice as long as you inhale. And you can do this for any number of counts that works for you. I'll start with 3 in and 6 out, and try to be, you know, about 1 second per beat. So you can keep your hands where they are, you can drop them, whatever feels best, but I'm going to count. You're going to breathe in for 3 and out for 6. So let's do that. Ready? Breathe in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can do this as many times as you need to. It's another way to just really start getting out of your head and into your body. So those are the simplest exercises I could come up with for really landing us here and centering. And I think my turn is passed on to someone else at this point. Judy, I think.
Actually, we're going over to Michelle. Dr. Rodriguez, if you want to take it on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My hope is that as you were breathing, you were able to check in just a little bit with where you're at right now, like how tired or awake you're feeling. And I'm going to talk about what we're all experiencing right now as we're moving through this health crisis. But I really want you to think about, as I'm talking about the different things, where you fall, where the people on your team fall, even like friends and family, like really putting faces with these different experiences. As we were preparing for this meeting, one of the questions that came up is kind of, what does it look like? And one of the things we talked about was that we should really assume that everybody's affected by this. In any given week right now, I meet with about 20 people and sometimes with groups, and I have yet to meet the person who says, I'm doing great every day and I'm not affected by this at all. So I want to talk through a couple different areas that people are affected in. And each one of these you can think of kind of as a continuum. So where do you or the different people on your team fall on this continuum? So all of us are experiencing rapid and continual adjustment. You know, from I've talked to people where they had to, you know, they got the notice to leave the building that they were working in quickly, gather their things, and they talk about how that adjustment was a big deal. But then each day we get new information from the news. Sometimes we get new information from our families and how their health is doing. And so the news, often we're hearing it all day long, and there's all of these continual adjustments to this new situation. Also, we're dealing with uncertainty, and this is probably the biggest and most pervasive one. Some days we feel like we kind of settle into it and we know what we're dealing with. And then, you know, 5 minutes, an hour later, we're back really dealing with fear, anxiety. We're wondering, when does this thing end? How concerned and protective should I be? You know, you'll get one message that says, do this thing, sanitize everything that you bring into your house. You'll get another message that says, you know, I don't know if it matters that much, wear a mask, save them for the frontline people. There's so much conflicting news, and so it creates a lot of mixed messages and uncertainty. People are wondering, you know, if they're going to be employed, how long they're going to be employed, at what percent they're going to be paid. And a lot of people are looking down the line and wondering, what does our new normal look like? What do these protests mean for what's going to happen next week? And so at any given moment, you could be sitting in a team meeting and everybody's thinking about different things, different areas of uncertainty while they're trying to take in the information and do their work from day to day. We're all also dealing with grief and loss. And again, this is on a continuum. Some of us are maybe not even thinking of it like that because it seems vague. It seems like grief and loss about vacation plans, ways of life, just whatever was normal isn't there anymore. The things that you could kind of count on, whatever your day used to look like when you woke up, it's now a completely different thing every morning when we wake up in the shelter-in-place environment. And so a lot of us are grieving, spending birthdays together, graduations, things like that. But as the grief intensifies, people are looking at loss of community leaders, maybe family, friends, and then there are people who have lost multiple people that are close to them. And I think even this, one of the things that I hear people talking about is if they've experienced that really close loss, they're going to these team meetings and work environments. And if nobody's talking about that thing, feeling really isolated, almost like they're in a completely different world than the other people on their teams. Another layer of this is the isolation and confinement. Most of us are just not used to not being able to leave our house whenever we want to. I'm a huge introvert, but even for my friends who are huge introverts, it's a different thing to choose to be indoors than to feel that you don't have that choice. And something that kind of overlaps with this is that if you're in a home by yourself, then you're isolated and feeling alone. You know, you may not have had a hug in a month. You may not have even known you needed hugs like that until now, or seeing a three-dimensional face, a face that's not on a screen. But other people are maybe in homes with lots of people, maybe people where there's a lot of conflict. And so, you know, sometimes they're going out and sitting in their cars or going on a walk to just get away from people for a little bit. So that sense that we don't have the same amount of control over our space is, I think, a big piece of this. Another piece is either being overstimulated all the time or understimulated all the time. So some people are out of work and really feeling like kind of at a loss of what to do, not enough things to do to feel purposeful, to keep their mind occupied. And other people are carrying multiple roles, wearing multiple hats that are really needed in this time, as well as trying to maybe educate children at home, care for older people in their home. And so they're taxed beyond what would typically be taxed. And so, you know, even thinking about that, each person on your teams may be showing up carrying very different loads in their various roles. One of the last pieces of this that I'll cover right now is just lack of access to normal coping strategies. So, you know, if happy hour was your normal, in-person happy hour was your normal coping strategy, that's not there anymore. You know, getting together and talking with people face to face, grieving losses together. Another one is just going out to eat. You know, there's a lot of simple things that we used to do that we kind of took for granted, going to the gym, that people don't have access to anymore. And so we're very quickly having to find different ways to manage a very different stress. And so one thing I would just put in your mind is that really when you sum all of this up, it is collective trauma. It's like this new threat came online that is COVID-19 that none of us have. It's an invisible thing, but it's something that none of us have dealt with, and it's really overwhelmed a lot of our individual resources and our collective resources to deal with. And so one of the main things that we're asking as we think about this morning is that you check in with yourselves. You know, any morning when you sit down at your desk and get ready to log in to your email or to a Zoom meeting, you can do that exercise in your chair. I thought it was great, you know, and just check in with yourself about how you're moving with all of these different variables, and really be aware that the teams that you're emailing or communicating with, that each and every one of those people is experiencing this, but on different levels. And the one last piece of this that I'll talk about right now is that because it is trauma, it activates our fight or flight system. And that system is really good if you know, it developed in a time where you might be fighting lion, tigers, and bears, and it would be over really quick. So lots of energy gets mobilized and then it's done. But right now, this is a thing that goes on for a long time, and our systems aren't really built very well for that. So you may be noticing in yourselves or in members on your team that they go up into fight flight, and that looks like a lot of energy, a lot of productivity, maybe not a lot of emotion, or that people are kind of dropping down out of that system is not kicking in or it's burnt out and there's no energy. There's less productivity. They're kind of just going through the motions. And for all of us, the front part of our brain that is really great at memory, focus, it's just glitchy right now. It's not working usually at the same capacity that it usually would. And so we've really got to think about how we make space as we're doing the really important work that we're doing for everybody to be in their different places in this experience.
Thanks, Michelle. We want to invite those who are listening to just think about how do we normalize, create space for, and support each other through this and our teams. We'd love if you are able to offer some responses in the chat box. One person said, it's so good to acknowledge that my prefrontal cortex is feeling glitchy. That is helpful. Another person notes that we
Yeah,
haven't
go ahead.
taken the time as a group to recognize the various ways we're all experiencing the pandemic, acknowledging the losses and/or confusion. We've focused on providing transparency and clarity on how it's impacting our work and our ability, but not the personal experience. Yeah, Susan, that resonates. Another person says, we've been starting meetings by naming one thing we have control over and one thing we don't have control over. That's awesome, Aubrey. We at New, we've been doing these every now and again, meditations together. We really are checking in and asking that question, like, what are you carrying right now of our teams? And also to attend to the sense of isolation, we started doing 15-minute morning gatherings. We just check in. Jennifer Jones shares that they've been so busy focusing on supporting other groups and people financially, but have done check-ins with each other as a team before diving in. And she's, as a result of this, going to suggest that we do a check-in before their Zoom meeting. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's move on, but please keep those comments coming and we'll come back to them again. Is this a question for the group, Judy, or with our guests? Some good comments. I wonder whether this can't be the beginning of recognizing that the personal is the professional. Oh, amen. Especially for those of us who have been in the workplace for a while, where you were sort of trained to leave your personal self at the door.
Well, so this slide is meant to direct us now to the next portion.
Can I make one really quick comment there?
Please.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
I think that I think that's so key. The personal professional integration is such a big deal. I think that a lot of the most recent research suggests that when we feel like we can bring our whole selves into our work environment and we can take care of ourselves in our work environment, we actually access our best work, our best productivity, the parts of our brain that are really creative and innovative come online instead of disengaging. And so I think when we figure out in our work environment what that healthy vulnerability looks like, it brings on access to whole new strengths.
If you're not in the chat box, there's really some great stuff. Folks are opening their meeting with sharing personal and professional best. Another is holding sacred space with her team to just check in on the person. Wow, thank you, Donna and Shamil. So yeah, Jude, it looked like we were gonna transition. Lisa, talk to us a little bit about what we're bringing into our bodies.
Sure. I think that something that's really been on my mind is I work mostly with women, and particularly with women over 40. And I noticed that we have really backburnered our own health and what nurtures us for the sake of everybody else. And something that struck me as I was actually walking this morning and thinking about this group was that in a very strange way, I sort of see nonprofits as the women of the professional world. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making too big of a generalization, but it seems like nonprofit directors and CEOs and leadership in general are very focused on the program side of things and the work that we do. And there is often very little attention on the capacity building of the staff in terms of their health. And so I wanted to just walk through really quickly some suggestions that I use when I work with clients about boosting immunity, just basically growing your own health in the interest of being able to live your best life and also take care of others. I mean, that whole oxygen mask metaphor is so apt. It's kind of tired, but it's really apt in that you really cannot take care of other people until you've taken care of yourself on a deeper level. So I usually like to start with food because I'm from the culinary world originally, and that's how I came to nutrition and integrative nutrition. And so I've noticed a lot of people rushing around trying to figure out what they can do to boost their immunity in terms of their food. And it's sort of a good news, bad news thing where I would say, you know, the bad news is that if you have not been taking care of your health, your immune system is going to be quite low. The good news is that you can start today, and it doesn't have to be a big and expensive proposition. It does not have to be that you run out and buy the newest supplement that claims to do X, Y, Z. I always like to really bring it back to basics. And what that means from my perspective as a health coach is trying to get people to cook from scratch at home more often. Now, you know, a lot of us are thinking, oh my gosh, I've never had to cook so much in my life. Of course, as a health coach, I'm sitting there going, wow, this is a great opportunity. So really encouraging people to figure out how they can cook from scratch more often at home without making it overwhelming. And really, it starts with whole foods cooked from scratch at home. You don't need to megadose on anything. And I will add, especially on any food that tends to make a health claim, if there's a health claim on the package, I'm immediately suspicious of it. Avoid highly processed foods if you can, and really focus on nutrient density. And what that means is that we tend to obsess about our macronutrients, so where we get our calories, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. And I will observe that as Americans, we tend to be energetically overfed. We get too many calories, and yet a lot of us are nutritionally deficient, meaning that all those calories we're taking in don't come with a lot of vitamins and minerals. So I'm a kale pusher. I will push kale on anybody who will eat it. If you don't like kale, I will say that any dark leafy.
I've never heard that before. I love it.
But if you can start with, think about eating a rainbow of vegetables. We tend to sort of hover towards the middle of that rainbow. I really want to see some dark leafy greens and some really bright oranges and deep purples going on your plate every day if possible. I'm providing a detailed list of these things in a blog post that I wrote, so I won't go into detail about specific foods other than to give kale a shout out. The other thing is that I like to say in my business, it's the food and it's more than the food. You can drink a green kale smoothie every morning, and if there are other parts of your life that are out of balance, really out of whack, those smoothies aren't going to do you a bit of good. So in terms of lifestyle choices, there are a lot of things we can be doing right now. I've heard that sleep has actually skyrocketed in America during the lockdown, and that's actually a really good thing, although I know that for a lot of people that increase in sleep really has to do a lot with increased depression. But the more sleep we can get now, the better. Definitely move your body.
Hey, Dr. Lisa, quickly on the sleep piece, can I just, I read something, and maybe even Michelle has a comment about this. I would like to just stay on sleep for a moment because I understand it's a stress response as well, that we're being triggered in, we can't, you know, this is the fight, flight, or freeze. Like we can't fight, right? The disease is invisible. we can't run away from it because we're sheltering in place. And so sometimes that tiredness is really the body's version of sort of playing dead in trauma,
Yes.
right? Is that, yeah, that was really
Yeah.
enlightening to me.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because something that occurred to me, especially when Michelle was talking about how some of us go into overdrive when we're stressed and some of us go the opposite. I tend to be very productive, very efficient. And I noticed that that didn't really change, but I had this really strange, like low level fatigue that I don't usually experience.
Mhm.
And I find myself just really wanting to crawl into bed early, wanting to stay in bed later. And I think I finally sort of found the strength to acknowledge that, oh, okay, this is how my body is dealing
Yeah.
with the stress.
Yeah, agreed.
And also when we go into that down state, I mean, in some ways it's very good energy conservation. You know, a lot of us, we're not directly on the front lines, but we're that secondary line, and we need energy that's for now, but also for the things that are to come. And so when we dip down into that state, although that's usually kind of seen as a negative place, there's a lot of kind of comforting endorphins that get released. There's energy conservation that happens. I do want to note that as part of trauma, a lot of people are having intense dreams where it's like your brain trying to process this thing that's happening that it can't process when it's awake. So insomnia and these intense dreams can be part of it. And for some people, it's like, I know for me, the first few weeks, I was very much in fight or flight. And these past 2 weeks, I'm still doing the things, but it's hard to find the energy the same way. And some people are fluctuating more within a day. Like 1 minute they're high energy, the next minute they're like, why am I crying and why am I exhausted? So just knowing that however that's cycling, it's just your body's way of trying to move through this.
Yeah, there's folks are just really resonating. There were feelings of low energy and fatigue for the first several weeks. Only last weekend did they feel like they were feeling stronger and able to be more active. One person suggests like backing off of technology a couple hours before sleep really helped them. And then Epsom salt, baking soda, and lavender baths to help relax the body. Shutting off the screens seemed to be a common theme. Lisa, talk to us about building our immunity a bit more there, and then we'll.
Yeah, and I want to leave
do
a lot of
quick
time
check
for.
that we're at 8:10. Sorry.
Yes, I want to leave a lot of time because I know Michelle has some wonderful stuff coming up. So what I'll say about building immunity is if we can bring ourselves into the present, the more we can bring ourselves into the present, the more we can calm that immune response, that stress response. And I think it really comes down to acknowledging that we do have a choice. And I think probably a lot of us, if not all of us, know the quote from Viktor Frankl about between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. I think when horrible things happen, we can really quickly move to a reaction rather than a response. And one exercise that I like to do with people, and again, this will show up on the resource page also, but something that I use with clients, and I've actually used a lot with my own children, is to bring yourself to the present. I have one child who is highly anxious and is always thinking, 20 years ahead or 10 years ahead, 6 months ahead. And this pandemic has been a really interesting experience for her because she went abroad to study in Germany right as the virus was sort of heating up. And it started even before that. She went to visit her father in Hong Kong. And so we had these conversations where we constantly came back to 4 questions. And those 4 questions really are like, what is the problem right now? So she would say, I need to come home right now because I want to make sure that I'm home for fall semester. And the question really is, well, is that a problem right now? It's not really right now. Like, where are you right now? And what is the next right step? So do you want to come home? Do you want to stay in Germany? And we just had to keep revisiting the same questions over and over, but every time we had a little more information. So if you can ask yourself, is this problem right now, or is it 2 weeks from now, a month from now? And granted, there are some things that are immediate problems. And then the next question is, you know, what is the next right step I can take? And you base it on the information you have at that moment. You can't say, but what if, because then you're doing what's called future living. And you really cannot control the future, although you can prepare for it without panicking. And another thing to think about are the other two questions, which are, what do I want to achieve and who can help me? And I think very often we are in a space where we think, if I don't do this, who's going to do it? It's up to me. I'm the one who has to do it. And if you can back yourself down from that and recognize that there may be someone who can help you with what you're trying to achieve, it takes a little bit of the load off. So I would really recommend, if you can ground yourself in the present, figure out whether the problem is immediate or something in the future. You know, bring yourself to what the problem is today and what the information is that you have that you can make a decision on, and just take the next right step. It doesn't have to be the right step that's going to happen 20 years from now or 2 months from now.
Yeah, somewhat related, but not quite. I want to just acknowledge that, and maybe, I don't know if it's you or Michelle, but folks talking about the challenge of finding rest. And I imagine even finding the contemplative time for these questions. What do you suggest for those who have children at home or who are being pulled in multiple directions in terms of finding, you know, the space to either to rest or to ask these important questions?
So what I would say, and I saw a lot of the questions about the doing, the raising of kids and working at home, and that's definitely my situation. I love, there's been some really great articles that talk about, you know, how do we full-time parent and full-time work, and that the answer is that we simply cannot. That the expectation that both happen and that both get done in any way that looked like whatever we expected it to be before this, that we have to give those expectations up. I think in the parenting role, especially thinking about it from a trauma lens, we focus on creating safety and connection, and then anything else that happens, great. You know, so if it's, I've heard one family talk about, like, just we have the constants of dinner and then we watch like something silly after that for about 30 minutes. Like that is the normalcy. But I think really tuning into your family, your situation, and not striving for getting it just right. Like there just really isn't such a thing. But really trying to figure out what is most practical. And hopefully creating space on your teams to be able to then advocate for what you need to get what can be done work-wise.
Yeah,
done.
you know, that's so interesting you say that. I feel as a parent, the pressure, like I don't want my kid to flunk out of the 5th grade or whatever, right? So it's always there, and I'm feeling like I'm having to deliver everything his teacher sends, or like we're the bad family if he doesn't. So we're presently, like there's a week of stuff that needs to be turned in, and every time we look at Google Classroom and it says that red, you know, not turned in, I like, you know, it's like 1,000 little cuts. But I think it's important, at least it's been important to acknowledge that we're crisis schooling, you know, and also to some degree parenting in a much different way. So I appreciate that grace that you invite us to offer ourselves, right? And also a bit of anarchy, like we're just not going to turn that stuff in.
And
yeah, I think you're definitely not the only bad mom out there if that's what you do. And probably my favorite post said that, you know, if you lose some months of learning, that can be made up for very quickly. If we enter into kind of traumatized emotional states, that's much harder to repair from.
Yeah, and a bit of sort of positive spin on it is that I'm also something going around on social media saying, you know, everybody's so concerned that these kids are going to fall behind academically. What if this is actually a really good thing? What if this is a chance for these children to learn compassion and to learn how to be a little more self-sufficient, how to respect other spaces and how to, entertain themselves. So just saying that there can be a lot of good that comes out of this. And the other thing I will add is that I have a lot of friends who are educators, and there was a really interesting discussion started by a woman from my high school class who said, I've just decided I can't. I'm going to come up with an education plan that works for my child, and he will learn enough to satisfy me, even if it's not enough to satisfy his teachers. And it was great because all the teachers jumped on and they said, we love that you're doing this, rather than, censoring her. And she was feeling as though it was disrespectful to the teachers to not do the work that they were assigning. And all the teachers said, oh, no, we're perfectly happy to have you do what you can do.
Yeah, I think it's important too, and I will say this to acknowledge ourselves as Indigenous teachers, right? That our children and our families are learning from us all the time anyway. But related to leadership and work, I think it is important for us to be thinking about how we can help staff with families by changing the expectations of performance or even when they're performing. So as an example, I needed to kind of check out for a few hours, and I gave my team a heads up. I need to be with my kid. I'll either get on later or join you in the morning. So we need to move on, but that was super helpful, and there seems to be a lot of activity happening here. Oh, and others are just saying, like, as businesses and organizations reopen, I'm hoping mental health becomes a greater conversation, because PTSD will be a challenge for frontline responders and those of us in healthcare. Thanks for that. All right. We want to.
Yeah, and what I will say too about that, even the fact that we're having this conversation now, one of the things that we know about trauma is that if you can name it, if you can put words to it, you immediately begin to deal with the effects of it. For example, like really quickly, when we look at the research about blatant racism versus microaggressions, microaggressions are often hard to label in the moment and name, and so the healing from them becomes more complicated. And so the sheer fact that we are in this space, and hopefully more people are in spaces naming this now and then continuing the discussion after this, is already the first steps in beginning to address the trauma. The other thing I would say that kind of echoes and sums up some of the things that we've been saying is that we almost have to just choose to have at the front of our brain that everybody that we're dealing with is human first. And so our kids are human first, as parents, we're human first. Like, we have all of these different roles, but if we can't take care of the human experiencing trauma underneath it, then we really sabotage all of the long-term stuff. So I'm gonna go through some of this other stuff, and I may not get into all of the details of it, but that can always, the content we can come back to it at any time. I just want to hit some principles to think about as you're moving through this. I've been using a lot the metaphor of either like birthing and labor or marathon running. I don't have any marathon running experience, so I'll use the first one, but you can think of whichever one you relate to most. In the sense that what we are coping with right now is intense and it is long-term. And so how you conserve your energy for the long haul of this is really important. It's not so much about like having a stellar day and trying to grind through, as much as it is, in birthing, between every single contraction you want to catch your breath, or the whole experience starts to really get swept away from you and get really out of control. And so thinking about these brief pauses, and that goes back to a question that Yodita brought up, to check in with yourself. I'm an introvert. In an ideal world, I like hours of silence and reflection and check-in. In circumstances like this, taking 2 minutes when you're brushing your teeth at the beginning and end of the day, taking 2 minutes when you're logging in or logging out of your computer, or once the kids are in bed, cumulatively over a week, having those 2-minute check-ins makes a big deal. I used the example when we were planning this meeting of, if in between every session I have, I'm stretching out a little bit and breathing, at the end of the day, those little micro adjustments have have helped with some of the wear and tear. And so that's what you're trying to do for yourself, for your family, for your team. Like Lisa talked about, is create those moments of pause where you can make these little micro adjustments that add up over time and help you kind of recover from the last wave of grief or the last wave of anxiety. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that together. I really loved a video, Holly Mitchell, one of the senators in California, of her team right before, I think when people went into shelter in place, they were in the office taking a break and doing the wobble together. And I think that the moments that we create to laugh together, to just check in, to breathe, to move, really do make a big difference over time. It's easy to think that they don't and to just move over them. I think the other thing is to really address, again, with that human first idea, this myth about being a strong leader. I think we really get pulled into this idea that either I totally delve into all of my feelings and all of my team's feelings, or I avoid it altogether and we just like march through this. And I think that we can check in, we can ask really quickly that, what do I need? What are these feelings telling me that I need, and make adjustments. This is probably not the time when we're gonna do our deepest, most intense grief processing. But breathing and feeling the sadness, the heaviness, and connecting with someone about it, to share a memory, to cry for a little bit, like those little things make the deeper processing that we do later so much easier. So I kind of think about this on 3 levels. Checking in with your body. There's a great quote by Resmaa Menakem who says, you know, there's a way out of this mess, and it requires each of us to begin with our own body. You and your body are important parts of the solution. And so whether you're dealing with yourself or your team, if you're thinking we're all humans first, how do we each take care of our bodies and our situations, and then attend to the productivity? So finding, you know, that pause in your body, listening to what it's telling you that it needs. And then I think really attending to our connections. Resilience, we often think of it as an individual thing, but again, as you come together as a team, when we feel like we are part of a team, as a family or as a work team, where we have each other's backs, where if one person is more tired one day and one person is more energized, that there can be some give and take, we tend to do better overall. And so for your own mental health, where are you kind of digging into your roots and connecting so that you get fuel back? And then what avenues are you using within your team to cultivate that shared compassion? And then lastly, I would just say using our sense of vision and purpose and hope as a guide through this also. There's so much that is discouraging and destabilizing, but I love the person who shared in the comments about that, what's that one thing that you're in control of and that you're not, that holding the both of those. And I've seen so many different quotes that talk about the reimagining of what the future looks like. And that, to be honest, every moment won't be the moment of reimagining. Some moments we're tired and some moments we're just getting through. But the moments when you do feel a little bit of that space to do it, it reminds us that, you know, there's really magical moments that we can have with our kids right now. There are really magical moments that we can have with our team right now. And that if we know where we want to end up, like the kind of futures we want to create for our team, for our communities, those principles will really guide us through this time and give us a lot of hope, direction, I guess, hope and direction about how we behave during this time to build that place that we want to go. So when it gets chaotic in this storm, I would say get stable in your body, get grounded in your connections, and kind of keep in mind that vision of where we want to go and what we want to create out of this moment.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. It's really resonating with folks. I asked if we could stay about 5 or 10 more minutes, and folks said that was okay. So want to give either you or Lisa opportunity to talk a bit about grief.
Okay, I'll jump in and start. I think that one of the things that has stood out to me, especially as we've seen the data come out on health disparities, and even just this kind of really polarized dialogue right now in politics about, you know, whether we're trying to save lives or save the economy. I just think in a moment where people, and particularly Black and brown bodies, are being treated as expendable, grief is this really sacred and disruptive emotion that comes up that says that every single person matters. And so I think I've been encouraging people, while it feels incredibly uncomfortable, to really invite it to teach us that if it disrupts for a reason. It tells us that the things that have been lost really matter. And it points us to what really matters to us going forward. And so, you know, one way to think about this is that it helps to micro process. I can call a friend one night and put on some music, share some memories, and I won't get, especially if we're doing it in relationship, we often won't get lost in it. I think that's people's fear. If I cry at all, I'll never stop. And we just really don't find that to be true, that with the tears, we release some of the neurochemicals that we need to release. And we also experience some of the good ones that we need to experience. And so even to whatever degree you can communicate to your team that taking some space for grief is okay, that it is present even if nobody's talking about it. I think those are really important things. And just also understanding that unfortunately grief doesn't like to operate in our Western time. It doesn't heal on any time schedule that we would come up with. And so our different organizations may only create so much space for it, but when people aren't cooperating, it seems like grief is not cooperating with those time schedules. It's not people being resistant. It's just this emotion that is doing what it does.
I would add that I think as leaders is also important. One of our local leaders of color last week talked about kind of like the bifurcation of her experiences as a person of color, and really being the only person of color in her workplace that was experiencing grief in a magnified way because of the number of Black and brown deaths. And that she had hoped that there was a bit more sensitivity to that, particularly in terms of the contrast of say that experience on her timeline, and also seeing coworkers making jokes about working in their pajamas or things of that nature. So I think the more explicit we can be, particularly if we're employing folks of color, about the reality for them and that is dynamic and real, that's important too.
Yeah. And really watching for bias, because I think, well, we know that Black and brown people are experiencing this in a more condensed kind of a way. And if we only have on a Eurocentric lens, then it may look like they're not performing or coping as well, and it's just not the reality.
That's good. That's good. Drew, do you want to move, or Lisa, do you want to get in there at all? I see you in the chat box, and there's a conversation in the chat box about this idea of work-life integration over balance, and folks acknowledging that all of those things come together to sort of make us a whole.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I've been thinking about this for a long time, that, you know, as a health coach, and most life coaches, other types of coaches, have these exercises called the circle of life or the wheel of life, and you're asked to rate different things in your life and try to work towards making it a perfect circle so that everything is in balance. And I've always had a problem with that because mine always looks kind of like an amoeba instead of a perfect circle. And what I've noticed is if you take a snapshot of what your life looks like right now, and then maybe a week from now, take another snapshot. If you were to layer these snapshots up, you might be surprised at how close to a circle you're getting. And also just recognizing that, you know, as we have children at home and have to deal with their needs, our work life is probably going to suffer in some way. And then eventually it's going to shift the other way. And so there's just this constant renegotiation of the integration rather than thinking about, oh, now I need to make everything in balance.
Yeah. As we wrap up, are there other questions, you know, of those of you who are participating, of our experts? Again, Lisa Baker, health coach, been supporting primarily women in their 40s around healthy mind, body, and spirit, and Dr. Michelle Rodriguez, who is a trauma expert psychologist, and also supporting communities of color. Any final questions for them?
I actually have a question of Judy. I'm wondering if the chat thread can be saved. It would be really nice to have access to some of these amazing comments.
We
Yes.
are saving the chat thread. Yes.
Great.
I'm going to include that as part of, I'm going to obviously take, you know, some of the content maybe out, but there's lots of great resources, lots of great comments here that I'll save for the resource document. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not seeing anything happening in the chat box. Oh, thank
Well, there's one. Any unique suggestions for people who at this time are experiencing, or re-experiencing different types of trauma?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that they're definitely not alone. That's a huge layer of this. One thing to know for people who have insurance, a lot of the insurance plans are currently waiving copays and even I can't think of the word. If you have a deductible, the payments that you would be making. So a lot of people right now can get therapy in their home for free. And even if you don't have a lot of quiet space, I'm meeting with clients who are sitting in their car, who are on walks, who are in bathrooms. But I would say a big piece that you can do, that exercise that Lisa did with the chairs, really helping to remind yourself, to like looking around the room, describing the room to yourself, reminding yourself that you're here and now and not in that previous trauma situation, can be a really just small, simple exercise. If you've done any work around your trauma before, thinking about some of the things that have helped you through, or even if you haven't done trauma work, thinking about things that have helped you through stressful experiences before. In the slides, there's a slide where there's a 2-column thing around trauma and healing, and so you can look at some of those. You can look at some of those principles on the healing side. I would say that mostly people just, anything that helps them be in the present, anything that helps them feel connected to other people, anything that helps them feel safe. You know, and that can be getting under a weighted blanket, that can be making a cup of tea and just breathing and watching the steam rise and smelling it because it brings you into the here and now. It's comforting. Right with our fight and flight system, we have a part that really does a lot of safety and soothing through connection. So talking to people in your life that are safe and are grounding can really be an anchor through this time too.
Thanks for that, Michelle. I think we don't really want to, but we're going to bring this to a close. Jude, a couple things. This series that kicked off today, again, thank you for joining us and your grace with us with the electronics or the technology piece, but we'll be doing this every couple weeks. I think it probably makes sense to circle back with you all, so let's talk about that. But next time on May 6th, we're going to be talking about taking care of people with 2 HR experts, Karen Andrews and Lila Asante Apia. Also just want to recognize our partners who are on with us, Alondra Bulger and Kyla Carlson from COACT in Detroit. We'll be excited to be joining them. Jude, get me to the next slide, please. We would love to hear your feedback. So if you can email us at info@new.org, or I believe there's a survey link too, Judy.
Yes, we're going to send out the survey link to everybody. Yeah.
Awesome. You want to take it from here?
Yeah, I can. Thank you for introducing what's happening with the dates. Everyone, we're going to go ahead and send you the survey, but if you have something, we'll copy the chat box. You're welcome to put things there, of course. But we will also include info@new.org. You can email us that way. But again, watch for future email from us. Thank you for coming. We have a bit of a request for you. If you like this series, we would love to be able to give some kind of stipend to our experts who are coming each week. So even a small donation is gratefully received. So I put a link up here on the slide if you want to use it to get to our donation page. We would really appreciate the help. And with that, these are some resources. So this will all be copied and put into the resource sheet I am actually compiling. Thank you to Alondra and Kyla and all of our friends at COACT, because a number of these resources here on the screen, as well as the growing 4-page plus document that we're compiling, will all be sent out to you as well. So I'm still working on that. Anybody that wants to email me at jmuhn@new.org, any of your links or resources, I would really be appreciative. I'll include it in the document. You know, each of us responds to different things, and having something that actually will work. For me, I've gotten back into yoga. Somebody else will really get into reading a blog post. So it varies. So any kind of link would be wonderful. Please, you are encouraged. And
Judy, maybe you want to mention that we're going to create a little Google Drive that will grant you access to, that will have today's deck, which will also email you, and the resource document. And yes, it is absolutely appropriate to invite other leaders, anyone in a decision-making position. We wanted this to be tactical, you to be able to get in, get some great resources, and get back out, so to speak. So yes, we invite any executive level leaders in your organization. Thanks, Susan.
okay. And with that, we are clearly beyond time, but we are happy that you all stayed. It's such valuable content. Thank you so much, Dr. Rodriguez, Liza Baker. Yodit, thanks for helping me out here too. And again, thank you for the grace that you gave us all trying to get us in here. So we'll do it better next time.
Judy, you did a great job. Thank you to you and Carrie Hammerman on our team, and we look forward to seeing you all in a couple weeks. You did an excellent job, Judy.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.